Record when you're ready. There we go. All right. So by way of introduction, the Progressive Multiplier team, you'll see us all here on slide number 4. Go back one. There we go. This is the Progressive Multiplier team. We are scattered all over the country on the East Coast and the West Coast. Right now, we don't have anybody in the middle, but that could change. As you see, we do have 2 open positions within Progressive Multiplier. And so if you know somebody who is looking to take on a managing director role in finance or operations, or managing our financial capital, aka fundraising, do let them know that Progressive Multiplier is looking for a few good folks. A little bit about Progressive Multiplier's vision and mission. Our vision is a sustainable progressive movement with the scale and power to achieve justice, realize democracy, and restore the environment. And our mission is money multiplied, knowledge democratized, and change amplified. We build progressive power by helping groups organize diverse financial capital and revolutionizing how the movement invests in its own ability to sustain and scale. A note about today's presentation specifically before we move on to the Partnership with Resilience Initiative. I know that I am a fast talker, but I often forget when I'm in the middle of presentation. So please unmute and interrupt me if either I'm speaking too quickly or if I'm advancing the slides too quickly, because I don't want anybody to feel rushed or like they can't keep up. And certainly feel free to interrupt me or put something in the chat in the middle of whatever I'm saying if I can answer a question, clarify something, or make this a better experience for you. All right, on to our partnership with Resilience Initiative. So you are all here because you have a relationship with Resilience Initiative, and we do too. So through the partnership that we have with Resilience Initiative, you have access to fundraising coaching with Progressive Multiplier, up to 5 hours of individual coaching or consulting, or even preparing materials. Let's say you need to work up a slide deck and you'd like our support in figuring that out. We can help you create some deliverables. Some examples of things we've done in the past, board fundraising trainings, developing annual plans, integrating marketing and fundraising communication calendars, and even training on major gifts. We do stuff that kind of runs the gamut. So if you're questioning whether the question you have is something we can address, give it a try and we'll see what kind of expertise we can rally for you. In addition to that, of course, you are here for Fundraising Friday. And so these are our once-a-month trainings on topics that we hope will help you focus on improving your revenue generation capacities. If you have questions about the partnership or you'd like to get engaged with coaching with us, reach out to Michelle. Her email address is on the slide here, and she will help you get connected to our coaching capacities and make sure that you have all the mailing lists that you need to be on in order to come to the next Fundraising Friday. Next slide. So today's learning objectives are to identify what defines a surge, and then what key checklist items you need to prepare for those high times, and then what defines a cliff, and pinpoint the checklist items to prepare for that kind of drop off and learn how to put it all together. So before we dig in, is your organization feeling a surge due to heightened attention or struggling to break through the noise and draw attention to your work? You can come off mute or you can engage in the chat or you can wait for me to call somebody's name. It's a small group today, so I'd love it if you brought yourself into the space ready to engage with one another.
Well, I'll go and I'll say that we're kind of unsure where we are because we work, on racial justice and immigrant justice. And so we're like, either of those scenarios seems possible, right? Either people are going to increase funding, but also there's a big wariness and confusion and people holding back. And we're like, which, it's hard to see the future there, right? Is this going to be me? Is it going to be a surge or a cliff? Feels like it could go either way, in this moment, right?
I'm seeing some nods on my screen. If you are a person who heard Tad and said, yes, that is where I am, put something in the chat so so that I know that Tad knows they're not alone. Because I think a lot of us are in that position of thinking, well, something could happen where people get outraged and decide to click those keyboards and get something to us to move. And anything could happen with our funding streams or Act Blue or anything. And so it can be definitely a time of uncertainty. Delilah says a bit of both. Our partners are definitely reaching out for more support, but at the same time, some of our funders are pulling away. Yeah, you are not alone there, Delilah. So thank you very much for sharing, and thank you, Tad, for sharing as well. Next slide. So we're going to start with talking about surges and getting sort of to a shared working definition of what a surge is. Next slide. So we think of a surge as that moment when there's like a lightning strike and you have the opportunity to raise big money because there's something that has sort of hit the airwaves that is drawing a lot of attention either to your organization specifically or the needs that your organization meets. So those surges could be a time when someone does something that mobilizes a bunch of people to say, hey, help me find a group that takes action on this thing that I'm hearing about in the news, and I want to, find someone good who can help address the question. So, for instance, mass deportations that happened several weeks ago. A lot of people are probably looking for a place to go to say, hey, take this money and get those people back here, or get those people in a position where they can access due process. Those are the kinds of moments where you might find yourself in a surge. Um, you'll have access to the slide deck after our conversation. So don't feel like you got to hurriedly write down all those letters and slashes. In this slide, you'll have access to that as we wrap up. Keziah, and forgive me if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Feel free to interrupt me. Um, I see, yes, it's a surge in moral support and overall engagement, but I feel like the funding donor piece is the same or has become more difficult. You're not alone there. I think a lot of people are experiencing either the uncertainty or just it's hard, right? It's hard to get attention from everybody. People don't know which way to look. Um, and funders are also not sure which way to look either. I think a lot of organizations are encountering that same challenge. Next slide. So, Louis Pasteur was right. He said that luck favors the prepared. And so, if you are prepared, your success is more likely. It's true that we can't predict everything. And we, I think, are in a specific moment right now where tomorrow's answer could be 180 degrees different from today's answer on any one part of the mission that you support, whether it has to do with your fundraising effort or your program effort or anything in between. Every day the news changes and we are facing, evolving circumstances all the time. But as fundraisers, we can be ready whenever opportunity comes our way. Uh, have any of you been to a fundraising Friday before where we've talked about building the bottle to be ready to capture lightning? If so, you can put it in the chat. Armin says not yet. Delilah has not either. So I want to refer you to a training that we have done in the last several months called Capturing Lightning in a Bottle. We are not going to go into deep discussion about how to prepare for the lightning moment in terms of narrative and individual giving fundraising. But we do have an in-depth exploration of how to do that um, on just the individual giving piece of your work and building your branding and messaging to leverage those lightning moments. So visit the Progressive Multiplier website and click around on resources for grantees, and you'll see our Lightning in a Bottle training, which you can access, watch the video, and avail yourself of the tools that are available there. Ophelia, I am so glad that you are here today for your first Fundraising Friday. I hope that you'll walk away feeling like it was worth your time. All right, next slide. So I have a thought about how many of us in the room have a search checklist, but I'd like to hear directly from you. Do any of you have either a checklist or a plan in place for what to do if you do get a big surge and see either funders being deeply interested in your work immediately or donors that have said, like, take my money and go do something good? Does anybody have a list or a preparation plan for that? I'm not getting any yeses, which means that you are in the right place today. Let's go to the next slide. So again, you'll have access to all these slides, so don't feel like you have to rush and write down all the items on this slide. But I want to talk about how to create your checklist for the moment of surge. This is the way to be prepared when the surge happens, rather than being constantly in reactive mode. And in this case, when we talk about surges, we're talking about either or both of an increase in attention from individual donors or from institutional funders. So, for instance, in the summer of 2020, when the Black Lives Matter protests were exploding over the murder of George Floyd, um, that's the kind of lightning moment or surge moment where philanthropy turned its eyes on Black Lives Matter and said, this is something we're going to pay attention to. But their attention span was kind of short. So in that moment, it was a surge for Black Lives Matter organizations and the movement for Black lives. And we want you to be prepared for when attention comes to your issues so that you'll have all the pieces in place or many of the pieces in place to not be surprised. Armin says, we don't have a formal search list, but definitely ideas of where resources could go. Excellent. So even having thought about that in advance is excellent, because sometimes those surges hit and you're kind of flat-footed. And our goal today is to help you not feel so flat-footed as you go into a high volume moment from supporters. Next slide. So the first item on that search checklist was strategic planning. And I want to talk a little bit about how to get yourself in the right place for your plan, your strategy plan. Think about this as an opportunity to revise your budget and projections. And sorry, I just lost my notes. Take this as a moment to revise your budget and projections to account for the increased funds. And note that if the increase in fundraising does take you beyond this year's allocated budget, figure out whether there are timely things that could be accomplished this year, or with the money could be better used as an investment in your future organizational needs. This should be grounded in the strategic plan that your organization is following. If you do not have a strategic plan, this would be a good time to also think about using some resources to develop a strategic plan so that you can have something to sort of hew to as you manage the adjustments to this new revenue stream. In addition, with your strategic planning, it's great to plan for your scalability. You want to be sure that your projects and initiatives can scale up with the funding, but you also want to check in with your history, your capacity, and your plans to steward relationships to do some calculations about how do you assume the risk of funding dropping in the next year, and let that dictate how you spend your money. So think about focusing on spending and seeking restricted funding to keep the flexibility of unrestricted money, which is often from individual donors, more flexible. This is a scenario where over fundraising makes sense. If you find funders coming to you with big chunks of money, but they're specifically designated for a specific program or they are um, tightly restricted, it's wonderful to have that money. And because it's restricted, you want to really overemphasize the places where you can get some unrestricted money to continue to undergird the rest of your work. Next slide. Oh, actually, I'm going to take a breath here. Does that stuff make sense? And do you have questions? All right. Next slide. Next on the search checklist is your communication and marketing. You want to make sure that you have a strategy in place for talking about the moment when the arrow goes up. Um, you want to be prepared to put in the groundwork ahead of time to be sure that you've established yourself as an organization, as a thought leader in the work that you do, so that when you're talking with organizations or funders about the work that you're doing in a moment of surge, they know that you know what you're going to do with that money coming up next. Um, Remember that because these surges in funding are often dictated by an increase of attention on your focus area, the tighter you are with your messaging and being very clear about what lane you occupy in the work, the more prosperous it will be for you. Because people will know exactly when to come to you specifically when they've got money to give. Additionally, you should update your stakeholders, including the donors or board members and volunteers, about the increase that you have in fundraising and what you're going to do with it. What is the impact of that increased funding for you? You want the people that are closest to you to know that you have a plan and also how it affects their engagement with you. And of course, when you've got a surge, your digital presence is really important. Um, you want to think about updating your website, your social media channels, and your fundraising pages to be sure that they're up to industry standards and that they look professional, to share your vision so that people, again, like having a polished or refined look that communicates the voice of who you are as an organization will just continue to build trust with your audiences so that you can hold on to their engagement with you over the course of time. Questions here? All right, next slide. So operational efficiency is a big item on your toolkit. Because one of the things that often happens in organizations when there's a windfall event is that organizations default to channeling all of that money into enhancing program offerings, expanding program offerings, and really pushing that funding into program specific allocations. And what ends up happening there, of course, is that you have not really built uh, shored up the other infrastructure that you need as an organization to keep operating. So this is a great time to assess your infrastructure needs, identify like, do you need to upgrade IT systems? Or if you are working in an office, do you need to upgrade the availability of office space? These times where you have increased funding are a really good time to invest in those infrastructure pieces because that is the sort of base at which you can continue to grow and scale your programming. Also, you want to review your staffing needs. Obviously, everybody wants to fire up the recruiting team at a time where there's a big boon. And obviously, we don't want to discourage you from doing that, but we also want to be very thoughtful about when and how to bring on staff. So we recommend that you only bring on staff who are essential to your mission right now, and for whom you can commit to supporting, like on your budget, and funding that position for at least 3 years, or until their work concludes if it is like a time delineated project. And in addition to like sort of commensurate with the infrastructure needs evaluation, thinking about um, optimizing your donation processing is actually kind of part of the infrastructure need question. Be sure that your processing system can handle a higher volume of transactions efficiently. Be sure that you have standard operating procedures so that people on your team know exactly how to process a gift when it comes in and can respond quickly to donor needs. Um, this is, of course, a good time to invest in potential fundraising diversification. So if you're getting a big windfall from foundations, but less so from individuals, this is a time when attention is on you to start focusing on how could we get more individual donors now that we have a little breathing room in our foundation portfolio. And so this is also a time to think about new ways to accept funding and how to set up to receive your funds efficiently. Maybe this is a time where you would consider um, maybe now at this point you don't have a way to accept gifts of stock. And perhaps when you have a little breathing room with a big windfall, it's a time to explore like how can we set up the system so we could accept stock or other sort of non-traditional, not just a cash check in the door types of gifts. And it doesn't have to be, setting up complicated annuities, but it is an opportunity for you to think about some of the other gift options that you have. Next slide.
Really quickly, Stephanie, if you don't mind, I wanted to lift
Wait.
Armin's kind of emphasis on standard operating procedures. And yes, standard operating procedures are not sexy at all when we're talking about within our organization. And sometimes we kind of like ignore it, right? Because there are these things that like we know how to do the work, it's there, like we get it. But I think having that standard, those SOPs, standard operating procedures, documents kind of there and outline, it really helps shore us up. It's part of this structure. It helps make sure that we're doing our due diligence to our organization and to our supporters and to our stakeholders. They're always there as a checklist for yourself to make sure you're doing what needs to be done. So there cannot be a stronger emphasis on SOPs that you should be carving out time to regularly review your SOPs. I have been in many organizations where I've come in as the new kid and I am like, great, I'm going to look to your SOPs, and they're like 5 years old. And a lot changes, as we know, in the spaces that we sit in, especially in like the fundraising seat. A lot things change very quickly. So 5 years is like 100 years in fundraising time. So absolutely take a look at those SOPs and make sure that they're kind of up to standard with the plan that is coming to fruition, right? You may have written those SOPs back in 2020 during COVID times. Those are not applicable in the now time, or you might need to make some tweaks to be able to support you to be able to kind of apply to what's happening now. So not sexy, and we kind of glance over them on our to-do checklists and whatnot as fundraisers, but absolutely make sure you're checking those SOPs because they could lead to bigger questions or other questions that you have in other structures that you're maybe not having an eye on. So that's probably what I would say there.
Yeah, Sabrina, that's absolutely right. And Armin, thank you so much for raising that because um, many of you have probably seen in your organizations over the last 2 or 3 years some turnover among the staff. Some people who might feel a little burned out or have decided to focus either on the same work in another organization or some other part of the movement and engaging somewhere else. And when people leave, the goal is that you get to have some people come, and you don't want them, as Sabrina said, like I start a new job, I come in as the new kid, and there's like nothing up to date enough that I can do my job. You want to try to keep those updated, but also it's very helpful in the event that you do have someone leave to have standard operating procedures so that if you can't hire somebody else to do that work immediately, you can at least keep the trains running on time and protect your revenue. And this is a chance for me to plug another training that we have available in our training library at progressivemultiplier.fund on protecting your revenue in the event of a leadership change or any kind of succession, even down to our social media manager left, and we don't know where the passwords are for our Instagram and Blue Sky accounts. We've got some plans to help you, work around, be prepared for the moment when someone says, "Hey, I won the lottery and I'm quitting. I'm already in Bali and you will never see me again." How can you be prepared for that moment so that your revenue doesn't vaporize because one crucial part of the system has disappeared? So definitely take a look on our website for protecting your revenue in the moment of succession. Next slide. So financial management, we talked a little bit about making sure that your budget can accommodate any new hires for at least a period of 3 years. That's certainly part of financial management, but taking like the balcony level view of it, as you're thinking about your search checklist, evaluate your financial controls and where your funds are allocated. It's really important to decide how the funds will be allocated across your current and possibly new projects. And really important to engage your board in the process. Hold on, pardon me just a moment. I've got a cough. That. So thinking about this as an opportunity to review and strengthen your financial controls and manage the increased funds effectively and transparently. When we say financial controls, we're talking about making sure that there's redundancy in the system, that someone is double checking that every dollar is accounted for, and that nobody has too much control over the money such that other people can't sort of see the inner workings of things. When you've got sound financial controls in place, excuse me, when you have sound financial controls in place, you can be more certain that the money you're seeing come in is going to be used in the way that it was intended. Additionally, a couple of slides back, I talked about the fact that you can use this money to scale up as you need to. The other thing that I highly encourage you to consider is using some of those funds. Like, we talked about what happens if we've got enough money to get us through this year and even to big chunk of next year. That's a time to take a look at, should we be creating a reserve fund if we don't have one? In an ideal world, you would have reserve funds that are equal to at least 6 months of your operating revenues, maybe even 12 to 18 months. This is a great time to talk about this with your board. What kind of reserve fund do we need or want to have? And how can you set up the processes and controls to begin to create that reserve fund when you do get a windfall? Next slide. Thanks. So the second to last piece of the search checklist is your community engagement and impact. We talked a little bit about making sure that you can communicate with some of your constituencies about this windfall. Engaging your community is a time to just engage folks with the your constituencies with the news and how it will impact them through your work. So what opportunities does this surge present for you and your mission? And how will they see you showing up in the world now that you're seeing this increased funding? That's a time to communicate whether you're expanding programs, whether you expect to see new programs evolving out of the work that you're doing currently. And also you want to be prepared to develop or update your metrics and systems to measure the impact of this increased funding. Not only because you want to be able to communicate that to the people that you're responsible to, whether that's donors or funders of the board, but also because when you're able to evaluate effectively the impact of that additional funding, it helps you make the case in the times when you maybe aren't in a surge, maybe it's just sort of business as usual, or maybe even you may have hit one of those cliffs moments that we're going to talk about in a moment. When you understand the impact of $1, $10,000, $150,000 to your organization and what that additional capacity really is for you when the money is really coming in, you could communicate that much more effectively to the people when you need to make an appeal for them to come to you with their charitable dollars. So use this as an opportunity to really develop your talking points about what you know in evaluation about how effective your work is based on these bigger investments.
I think also
And
to
last,
note, sorry, Tiffany, I'm gonna drop in that all of this, like the entire surge checklist and even the cliff checklist that we'll get into that Tiffany will get into in a minute, it builds trust, right? Showing what your work can do and the impact that your work does for the community, for your stakeholders, builds trust in your organization that you can do the work and that your organization is worth the long-term investment and partnership with your community members. So think about this as a way to build trust and engagement within your community. It's not just to put out a fancy annual report and write some grant reports to big funders in the sky. It's to show the impact of your work and build trust. So I would think of it that way as well.
that's so important, Sabrina. Absolutely. Building trust with your communities is incredibly important. And one of the ways that you're doing that in this sort of checklist is being really transparent about who you are, what you're doing, and how it affects people. Um, that goes a long way to establishing your expertise. Again, people love to like join a winning team, give to something that's successful. Um, and it also shows that you're willing to be held accountable for doing your work and doing good work in the world. And last but not least, next slide, continuous learning. Scheduling regular reviews of how the increased funds are being used to adapt plans as necessary so that you can ensure maximum impact. We talked about like going back to those SOPs and making sure that they're updating, checking in on your measurements about your success and how you're evaluating the work, measuring your impact. All of these are ways for you to take a look backwards and then adapt what you're going to do going forward. And you want to do that consistently so that you don't find too far down the line that you overinvested somewhere that you're not having the kind of impact you want to have. And then trying to figure out sort of how do we adjust for the impact that we want to have by moving funds, in a different direction internally. So scheduling those regular reviews gives you the peace of mind to know that you are consistently moving in the agreed upon direction as an organization. So next slide, I'd love to hear from you in the chat, or you can certainly come off mute. In fact, I would love it if you came off mute so someone could hear a voice that's not mine. How many of you who here has any elements of this search checklist already underway in your organization?
I was going to type it in the chat, but I figured it might be too much. And then we've got some other staff members from Heirs to Our Ocean present today as well. So y'all feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think as it relates to the surge checklist, we're working on refining, revisiting our strategic plan, but then also like development. Yeah, perfect, Emily, exactly. We definitely got that comms and marketing, but everything else, I think we're really wanting to um, like revisit and or build back up again.
Emily mentioned in the chat, and I think Emily and Armin work together. We have some of the strategic planning and comms and marketing ones, but not everything. So this is really helpful to see. I'm really glad to hear that, Emily. One, it's great that you have some of the strategic planning done. And also, I'm happy that some of this might contribute to you being able to get even more prepared going forward. Before we move on to the next slide, does anybody have questions or want to talk about how to actually like implement this checklist or develop it internally?
Well, I had a question that kind of
Yeah.
does speak also to what we've done in the past, right? So we had in a few years ago sort of a surge, and we went through we weren't fully prepared, and we had to learn a lot of these things in the process. Um, but at the same then since then, there's been a lot of leadership transition. So my concern would be that if we get into this situation again, right, that we will kind of have lost some of the lessons learned from that process. So I guess I'm kind of thinking about like what is it that we need to do so that we could have like embody those lessons learned um in a way that will then be able to be transferred to folks now in case this situation comes up again so that we actually preserve that knowledge.
Ted, that's a really good question, and one to which I don't have a complete answer, but I do think it's worth our discussion as a group. Um, I think anytime you can get together and do a postmortem on sort of what your high moments and low moments look like and how you responded to them, even if it was several years ago, um, thinking about like knowing that you're in a new era. Um, pardon me. Go through what your strategic plan was at that time and take a look at like how well did we hew to that? Um, how how did we go about allocating money? Let's talk with the finance team. How did we allocate those funds, and was that looking back an effective way? Did we overinvest anywhere that we later had to correct for? Do we now look back and think we should have invested more over here? Did we lose all the development team because we didn't invest enough in their retention and their overwhelm with this, new revenue streams coming in? I think it's actually never a bad time to sit down and maybe you start with just like a brainstorm for yourself of like what worked and what didn't, and bring some folks together to say like, can we talk about this? Tell me what worked and what didn't for you during that period of time, and how can we prepare ourselves for the next one, knowing what we have learned, and how does that feed into a checklist that we would create? You may want to add different elements to your own checklist. Some of these might not be a perfect fit for you. But doing a little bit of looking back and debriefing on that period of time in your organization can help you refine the pieces of your checklist that you think are most important. Has anybody else had this experience where they've kind of looked back at a moment of surge and tried to identify their lessons learned?
And I'll kind of drop that we might already be doing this, and you might not be defining it as like a surge or like a postmortem the way Tiffany is. But when we go into this like last quarter of our most of us are on that June to July fiscal year, when we do our annual planning, right? We look back and see we take a look back in order to take a look forward. So you might already be doing this in a way, or you've been trained to do this, or this is just something that comes up, just kind of like bumped and added a little bit more and grown a little bit more. So think of it that way too. Is when you're looking at your annual planning, you might already be taking, consideration of some of the things we're talking about in your own department's annual plan. It's just we're asking you to kind of expand your lens a little to include your whole organization or other elements that you might not be considering on that annual basis also.
And Tad, I've recognized that because of things like turnover, uh, you may find that there aren't as many people who went through that rolling hill with you still. And so uh, capturing those lessons learned with a smaller body of people who actually experienced it is a little bit more challenging. Um, but I do think even just sharing a document that says, hey, folks, thinking back on the moments when we had these big bursts of attention, what is the plus? What's the delta? What worked really well for you and what really didn't work well for you? What systems did you not have that you want? Um, and how can we plan to coordinate better for the next one? a couple of notes in the chat. Keziah says our comms is really strong, but everything else is not to the same degree of preparedness. Kind of co-signing what Emily said earlier. My org also only recently transitioned from a fiscal sponsor to our own 501c3, so we're trying to find the balance of building foundations while responding to the surge. How fortunate for you to be in a surge moment. That is spectacular. And it is challenging to try to do both at the same time because the surge feels like a rapid response moment and the building feels like the long-term thing, right? And it's hard to even switch gears mentally from the like go, go, go of rapid response to the okay, let's methodically set up the systems and the processes that build the foundation. So I mostly am just like sending you a lot of compassion because it's a lot when you're, as people love too often to say in our field, building the plane and flying it at the same time. It is challenging.
I would also say that that's funny, Keza, because that's what happened to us too. We got our surge right when we were spinning off from a fiscal sponsor and had that same challenge of like trying to build an organization but also respond to the moment and the surge in interest.
But how fortunate for both of you to be spinning off from a fiscal sponsorship and then get a nice big chunk of change to kind of cushion the blow of the big transition. Armin says, we had a virtual community gathering in March. We've conducted a debrief session to improve our next one. We should do this for our fundraising campaigns as well. Absolutely. Anytime you plan an event, you should have the pre-con that happens right before you kind of go live. And then immediately after, if it's that day or the next business day or this business day back after everybody takes a week off because they're exhausted, do that debrief session, even circulate a document beforehand, pluses and deltas, what worked, what didn't, what will be changed, and any important feedback also. Make some sections on that chart for people to fill in, and then come together as a team and talk through the pluses, the minuses, and any important feedback. Delilah says, the org I'm with has barely started on fundraising, so no real plan has been established in my department. We have a great strategic plan, but this meeting has reminded me that we need to integrate more fundraising planning into the work. We got a bit of a surge about a month ago, and I don't think we capitalized on it the way we could have. This is a very familiar story, which is exactly why we're here today to talk about surges, because they hit you by surprise often. And then you look back and think, we could have leveraged it differently if we'd had, something in place. The good thing is there'll be another one. I have every faith. I have to hold on to that faith as a fundraiser that there will be another surge. And you now have some materials to help you get ready for that. And I just want to highlight something. You said we have a great strategic plan, but this is reminded we need to integrate more fundraising planning into the work. One of the things that often really gets neglected in developing strategic plans for organizations are all the things that aren't programmed. Everybody wants to look at the shiny things because that's why you're here, right? You're here to execute on your mission, and that mission is achieved mostly through the program work that you do. And so that's the thing people want to focus on in strategic planning. But of course, you can't really execute on that if the funding isn't available, if your support staff are not well supported to do their jobs, then all the beautiful pictures about what the program team could do can't really come to life. So I really do recommend when you're in a strategic planning process, make sure that somebody whose emphasis is on fundraising is in the room to really be sure that perspective is reflected in the result of your strategic planning, because it is the kind of thing that a lot of people overlook when they get excited about the sexy parts of delivering on the mission through your program work. So thanks for raising that, Delilah. All right, next slide. Anything else that you want to chat about or questions that have come up in the course of just talking about the surges before we move on to the cliffs? And also feel free to ask one another questions. You might not have a question for me, but you might see a question in the chat that you want to expound upon. Please feel free to do that. All right, we can move on. So it's time to talk about cliffs. Does anybody recognize the cliff on the left? Or am I the only person? I might be the only one. That person is named Cliff Craven. And he was on a very famous TV show a long, long time ago. And I'm apparently very old.
I only recognize it because of like Nick at Night times where I wasn't supposed to be watching television and the show would come on and this was my like I'm up too late. This was the show that told me that I should go to bed.
That was
too
your
late in the night.
indication.
Yeah.
I agree with Sabrina, and I also would note that I'm pretty sure this has come up on like a Facebook meme. This is a reaction to something, but I can't recall specifically.
So some of you may know this face from some other avenue, but this is from the show Cheers. Let's move on to the next slide. So we are in a moment where a lot of us are hearing a lot of doom and gloom about the markets and the tariffs. It feels like inflation is in the air that we breathe, and it can feel like everything is going to fall apart. It is a difficult time for many of us. But we have been here before. Lots of organizations have weathered past storms, and we do have the knowledge and the tools to make it through this too. Next slide. So remember that you are what you repeat. In these moments of cliff, panic can be everywhere, and it does not have to reflect in what you are doing. That outside noise can get people into like sort of a fever pitch, but your employees and your donors are looking to you for calm. You can still show that you are an organization that can effectively achieve its mission and show that to staff and donors. It is very tempting to let the scarcity mindset take hold and send you into a tizzy, that there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough staff to meet the moment. But we are in the business of creative imagination. We all are individual organizations, have a vision of a better world that we are all trying to build. And it takes creativity, it takes imagination to pin your hopes on a thing that you cannot realize right now, but you believe you can achieve. So recognizing that all of our work requires us to be imaginative, it is the time to think about how do we get out of the scarcity mindset? Because we are living in an era where the country that we live in has a ridiculous amount of money. The money is there. There is, in fact, enough for everybody. But it's very easy to fall into the despair point of thinking, it's all falling apart and there's never enough. And remember that like communication is key here. You are not alone in the economic uncertainty. Earlier, when we first got together today, we talked about the fact that many of you are feeling, like tomorrow could be a completely different answer than today's answer. Everybody here is feeling the pinch of uncertainty. So this is the time to think about how you talk to your network about financial insecurity and set yourself up for those conversations to be productive as you move through a cliff moment. Next. So in the chat, please let me know or unmute. If you feel like you need a cliff checklist right now, I want to hear about it. Who's feeling that fierce urgency of like, this is the moment I've got to have that checklist ready? So calm in the moment. I'm impressed. Well, the good thing is that if you're not feeling like it's an emergency to get your cliff checklist in order, that's great. and you have time to do it now when you're not feeling the panic. Delilah says, my team could use one. Emily says, we do. Yeah. So some of you who are feeling the urgency of like, I actually really need this immediately, not alone. The chat says that there are others in the room. Next slide. So the checklist for your cliffs, the items that we're going to go through in the next several slides are listed here. Your immediate response, financial management and strategic planning, which are part of the things that we've talked about in the surge list, as well as communications. How to make operational adjustments, what to focus on in your fundraising and development, how to keep your community engaged, and again, how do you evaluate and adapt? I'm going to just let you take a look at this slide for another few seconds before we move on. Tad says, hoping not to need a search checklist, but want to be prepared. Perfect. Yep, the checklist is the thing that will set you at more ease going forward so you can anticipate that moment. Slide. So the immediate response. When we're talking about a cliff here, I'm mostly focusing not on sort of the slow retreat of individual donors who paid you a lot of attention at one moment and have turned their attention elsewhere, or maybe they're hitting a financial skid and they just don't have the extra cash around. I'm really talking about the cliff moment, which is not the slow trickle, but the drop off. And that typically happens when a funder has changed priorities or has some issue where they're not able to deliver funds to you the way that you had anticipated. Either they have changed strategic plans or there are different mission focus that has caused them to move away from the work that you are doing. And that can cause like an immediate drop off in your revenue picture. Those are the moments where we really think of as a cliff rather than the slow attrition of funding, which, is part of the up and down of giving, whether it's foundation giving or individual giving. There are some years where like some funders are just not going to renew for one reason or another, but they're not enormous enough to be the cliff kind of scenario. These are the moments in this checklist that we're talking about where it's really a big kind of earth-shaking, significant change. So in the immediate response of a cliff, this is the time to assess your financial impact of a big change. Evaluate how the loss of funding affects your budget and operations. You want to be sure that you are leveraging all the expertise you have at your disposal, including coming to Progressive Multiplier. If there is a time where you need a few hours of coaching to talk about your cash flow analysis, your ability to make payroll, whatever. As soon as those kinds of issues arise, you want to have a contingency plan in place. So this is the moment to really think about how can we be prepared to immediately assess financial impact. In the moment of a cliff, make sure that you have a plan to communicate with your key stakeholders, your board, your staff, your major donors, about the situation. And if you don't have an immediate planned response, hopefully you will, because you've got a toolkit in front of you you've got your checklist in front of you to be prepared. But let's say in the moment that you don't know exactly what your planned response is going to be, you can talk to them about the current situation that you're in and then ask to keep the door open to come back to them when you've got your planned response. Maybe you want to use them as a sounding board, to say like, does this feel like the right direction to go? And talk about how you hope that will help you to continue to fulfill your mission. And then review your legal obligations. Obviously, when there's a big drop off in a major supporter, you want to take a look at like, what are our contracts saying? What have we agreed to out in the world that we need to be sure we are positioned to fulfill? Make sure you understand the legal implications of a funding loss, and including like how it affects your contracts and agreements. Next slide. Financial management. This is the time to adjust your budget, revise your budget to reflect your reduced funding, cutting your non-essential expenses. Use the projections that you did in your surge toolkit to understand your best case, most likely in disaster scenarios, to be sure that you're aware of what you'll have to cut and when to maintain and how to maintain your solvency through these hurdles. Think about your cash flow management. Prioritize your payments and expenses that maintain your essential operations. Take a look at what is optional and auxiliary and essential, and understand how to prioritize those going forward. You want to really try to exhaust the cutting of your optional expenses and your auxiliary expenses first before you cut the essential expenditures, because the essential expenditures can still help you fulfill your mission and stay focused on progress. And don't forget that when you're thinking about your financial management with a big drop off, look into some emergency funding, whether that is a grant from someone who has a system that really allows them to be flexible and respond in the moment. There are, in fact, some foundations that do have sort of rapid response monies available for situations like this. That doesn't take like an 18-month grant review cycle and 75 pages of paperwork from you. And you can also check for loans that are designated for nonprofits that are facing a sudden financial crisis. Next slide. Strategic planning. So we talked a little bit about strategic planning as it pertains to surges, and we're going to talk a little bit about doing this with a cliff. Developing your short-term action plan and to prioritize your programs and services. This is a time to look at like what is the very most critical thing to the mission, and then what can be scaled back or suspended. And that might mean that the most mission critical thing you do is still your priority, but maybe you execute it differently or in a more cost-effective way. Make your plan to get you through the fiscal year to navigate the immediate crisis. Making sure that you're sort of focused on what are the core operations we need to execute. And when you've made those evaluations about where do we trim, where do we pull back, make sure that you're understanding under which conditions you will feel comfortable bringing back programs that you either scale back or eliminate. It's really important to understand how you will know that it is okay and time to bring back a program. And then develop a plan for resource mobilization. Think about strategies to replace lost funding, including new fundraising campaigns, new partnerships, donor outreach. Maybe you develop in this moment where there is still abundance. Maybe you develop a partnership with another organization to fundraise together and leverage your individual unique contributions to whatever question that's at hand to sort of cross-pollinate your audience and their audience and see if that can help you both raise more money. Next slide. Communication. We've talked a little bit about how to do this in the big moments of the upswing, but it is just as important when you have a cliff to keep your stakeholders informed about your situation, and particularly letting them know how they can help. If necessary, you can prepare statements for the media or the public to explain your situation and how you're addressing it, and make sure that if you are doing that, you're really engaging your board in how the messaging will come together and what you can sort of collectively agree on are the most important things to share with your audiences. And of course, this is a time to really engage with your donors. Reach out to your existing donors for support, emphasizing the importance of their contribution. If it's time to renew a gift, obviously you can talk to them about making another gift. If it's not time to renew a gift, this is also a time to ask them to help you expand your network with people that they know who care about this work, who could possibly become donors or become supporters in some other way to help you weather this storm. Next slide. Operational adjustments. We talked about what to do in terms of program. Where do we need to scale back? What do we need to trim? With staffing, similarly, you may need to consider a temporary reduction in staff hours, or unfortunately, layoffs as a last resort. But if that's the case, please ensure that you're complying with labor laws and that staff are treated as fairly and compassionately as possible. And if needed, consider engaging volunteers to fill some gaps and support operations if possible. Not every organization has the capacity to bring on a volunteer to help fill gaps. But if you have SOPs, there are some things that you might be able to engage some outsiders in where they don't need a deeply intimate knowledge of your work, the day-to-day of your work, in order to be helpful in a time like this. And then thinking about how you optimize your operations. Are you looking for all the ways to reduce your operational costs that don't significantly impact service delivery? And it could be big things or little things. It could be about reminding people to turn off the lights every time they leave the room. Maybe you, sort of minimize your office hours so you're not driving up the light bill and everybody's only in on a couple days a week. So that you can just think about the ways that the little trims here and there can still be a significant benefit to you. And we're almost through the Cliff's checklist. The next slide is about fundraising and development. Think about this as an opportunity to really amplify your individual giving fundraising efforts as well as your grant writing. If you don't have an online fundraising presence or you have one that is not well publicized, let's push that out on your socials. Make sure that people know that they can make a gift to you. Be sure that you're in touch with your major donors to talk about whether they can make a larger gift and help to sort of bridge the troubled times for you. Think about whether you can explore a new funding stream that will help you to reduce your dependency on that single source that sort of disappeared from under your feet. And also be sure that you're using your socials to reach as broad an audience as possible. And if needed, make sure that you are making it clear that there is an urgent need for you as an organization and specifically for the mission that you're trying to achieve. Next slide, Sabrina. There we go. Thank you. Community engagement. As I mentioned earlier, this is a chance for you to look for partnerships with other organizations to, share services. Maybe if you have been with a fiscal sponsor, but you've spun off into your own C3, maybe your fiscal sponsor is a place where you could turn to say, hey, can we, share some services together? We have a good relationship. You know how we work. There's an established trust. Is this a place where we could share some resources so that we can reduce our expenses? Or if there are joint funding opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, finding a partner and delineating your unique contributions to the movement and how each group amplifies the other can present a unique fundraising opportunity for you. And again, in continuing to build trust, make sure that you're engaging the community. Rally their support through awareness campaigns, making sure they understand the value of your work, the impact of the funding loss. And really, again, this is just that time to keep building the friendships and the relationships that help to sustain you, because you need their trust when the time comes for you to ramp things up. And, when you've got that next surge coming, you want them to still be deeply connected to you and knowing that you are maintaining the highest quality work that you can in the time of, a big challenge. And last but not least, evaluation and adaptation is the next slide. We talked about monitoring in the surge, the surge checklist as well. Make sure that you're constantly assessing your situation and knowing how to adjust your strategies when you come to the moment of the cliff, which direction to turn. Knowing that before it happens is really helpful for you. It saves you time and it saves you a lot of stress. And to Tad's comment earlier, keeping a record of the strategies that worked or didn't work And documenting what you have learned in the process is really, really important. So think about how you can be prepared to do that kind of postmortem before you hit the cliff. This is your checklist to know, like, what do we need to be prepared for and how will we address it in that moment? So making sure that you have a plan for documenting your lessons learned, and then socializing the message to people internally about how to implement the lessons for the next time. I have talked at you almost nonstop for 70 minutes. So I'm going to take a deep breath and open the floor for your questions before we move on to putting it all together. Who in the room thinks they've got some part of the Cliff toolkit already prepared? Or your Cliff checklist? Nobody yet, which means that you have something you can implement immediately when you get off this call. Let's talk about putting it all together. Now that you've learned about the checklists, what comes next? Think about this as an opportunity to put your board to work. In times of uncertainty, it's time to lean into the experience and knowledge of your board. Make sure that they are engaged in the planning and the execution. We talked about this in both the planning for the surging and the cliffing. Make sure that the board is with you the entire time. Keep communicating. Your people need to know how you're responding in the moment. And again, it's another opportunity for you to build trust and build giving. And revisit the checklist anytime something significant changes. If you've got an executive director leaving, take a look at that plan. Is this going to be a cliff moment for you? Is the arrival of a new executive director going to be a surge moment for you? How can you be prepared for what might come in that kind of transition time? Next slide. And remember that if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. As Pasteur said, like if you're prepared, you are more likely to succeed. So make sure that you've filled out that checklist, you know what it is. Give yourself time to ideate and daydream about the coming windfall, because we are charged with being imaginative. So think about the ways that the wins that you can achieve when you see that surge come through, and have a plan for that. But really begin to ideate on like, how does this help us change the world? Because that is useful in the practice of being sure that you're ready to change the world. And then, of course, create your CLIPS checklist, and remind yourself that you can rest easier when you know that you have a plan, even for the tougher times that are coming. And don't forget that your board needs to be engaged so that you are all prepared to engage and act. And I'm going to take a breath and check in the chat here. Armin says plenty of takeaways. Our note stock is already 7 pages deep. I like that. That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. I also love that people are sharing the work of documenting your learnings together. Because I find that when I take notes, I catch things that other people aren't thinking about, and likewise, they catch things that I never even noticed. So that shared work is great.
Which is also a benefit of making sure you're putting together these surge lists and cliffs with other people in your organization, because there could be things that your fundraising brain is like packed to, but your operations manager might have other insights. That is also very important to the work that you're doing. So make sure this conversation is cross organization as much as you possibly can, because we're a team. So we got to make sure that that is included in the work that we're doing, because as much as the fundraisers on this call can plan for, you know, the big cliffs and big surges, our wonderful spreadsheets that we put together and the documents that we put together will be moot if programs is not on board, or they have a completely different plan, and conversations are siloed. So we have to make sure that those are bridged and that we're working as a unit within our organization and not as individuals. So it's great that you all are sharing ideas and building off of it.
So Armin mentioned there are plenty of takeaways and their notes doc is already 7 pages long. I would love to hear from everyone here, one or two things that you are taking away from today's training, um, something that you learned either from Progressive Multiplier or from the other people in the room that you're going to carry with you as you walk out. Please feel free to unmute and chat if that is easier for you, or feel free to type in the chat if that's better. And I will call on people if I don't get any answers.
As a member of Tiffany's team of Progressive Multiplier, I can tell you that she's not lying. She will.
Zoe, I'd love to hear from you about something that you're taking away, one or two things that you learned today that you'll take with you.
Yeah. I like how you brought up like terms that like use surge, and you also used the term like when Black Lives Matter got a whole bunch of donations. The term escaping me now. But kind of terms for those types of processes I really appreciating to like categorize what those processes were. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciated the focus on consistent reflection before action. What did we do before? What worked? What didn't? How can we do it better? Ah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Tad says the importance of having this all thought out and documented ahead of time and to do it for both the surge and the cliff. Wonderful. Thank you.
I really like the part about partnering with other organizations and looking for those partnership opportunities with other nonprofits that are aligned with the work that you're doing. So they think diversifying funding in that regard and looking for possibilities where you can do like a joint proposal would be really meaningful.
Yeah, that's so important, Emily, and I'm really glad that you raised it again because um, it can feel very isolating, particularly when you're in a cliff moment. You feel like no one knows how troubling this is for you, right? And it's just very difficult. You feel like you're kind of alone in the struggle often. And sometimes finding that partner who is also going through it, but has something that, like you can be complementary to one another is a really great place to identify one, we're not alone, and two, there is abundance still available. We can partner together and not live in the scarcity place. Maura, do you have anything you want to share about things you learned today?
Yeah, piggybacking off the partnering with other organizations, I think this is the main point that I'm going to bring back to my team because we have been really hesitant in doing so. So I don't know if you have any suggestions or ideas of how to bring this up to, your ED and other parts of the team to really, try to see if this could be a possibility.
One way that you could do it is actually kind of maybe simplistic. And that is to actually, like, as you draw up your checklist, have that conversation as you identify that partnership as an opportunity. Say, hey, we now understand from this checklist that partnership is a possibility. How would we go about doing that? Is there buy-in? Can we get to the same place as an organization about whether we might do that and even maybe what direction we might turn? Thinking of it more as a process question than a I have to do it right now question, sort of the how would we rather than the let's do it now, sometimes gets people out of the panic mode and allows them to sort of think, be more thoughtful, I guess, in the process. Oh, Keziah, thank you so much for your kind words. Chloe, Orshi, Delilah, anything else that you'd like to share with us about things you're taking away today?
Yeah, I popped mine in the chat, but also I think like it's good for me to be reminded just like how helpful having open communication about this is. I think like I often think about these things in my head and I hold it, but even just like discussing openly with the team, like, hey, what is our plan of action in case these things happen? And even if we don't like fully like, create like a step-by-step plan, which of course would be the goal, but even for us to like it to be said beforehand. So it's just like not all hitting us at once. Cause I feel like that's what was missing when we had our surge. It's like we had never even discussed the possibility of us having a surge. So like when it happened, it was like we were like chickens, like with our heads cut off. Like we are like, what the hell? So I feel like in this kind of situation, it's the same thing. Like even if I just bring it up during one of our meetings, even if during one of my fundraising meetings with the team, it's like, hey, today this is the topic. Like how you said, it's not necessarily like something we have to get done like right this second, but like a conversation even just to be there. So in case something like that happens, we're at least all even familiar with the terminology.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for that, Delilah. Sometimes just the sitting down to talk about it can feel like it lifts a weight from your shoulders.
Totally.
Chloe says, I found this helpful and I'm excited as a new fundraising associate with Heirs to Our Ocean to utilize these skills. Or she says, as a larger org that's been around a while, I think we have some of these things down, but we do struggle with being siloed and there's always room for improvement. So I'll take that back to my team. Fabulous. Well, folks, thank you so much for being here today and for contributing to the group's learning with your comments, thoughts, suggestions, questions. Please take a look. Sabrina has posted in the chat a link to a quick survey about today's session. It's really, really helpful to us if you fill it out, just so that I can know what I did well, where I failed, what could be better for the next time for you. We want these to be useful for you, and we want to deliver them in a way that meets you where you are. So please, if you could just give us a few minutes by filling out that survey, it'll help us know how to proceed. Delilah says, can I share a quick resource with the group before this ends? Absolutely, please do. And while she's sharing that resource, I'll just advise you, we do have another fundraising Friday coming up on May 30th for mid and major donors. We'll be looking at developing your mid and major donor program and how to cushion yourself against the vagaries of foundation funding. Delilah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, this is just a really cool signatory letter that any nonprofit in the United States can sign. It's essentially like a collective group of nonprofits got together and wrote this, and it basically just calls out kind of the attack on the work that's been happening, the attack on our work, and just different nonprofits from across the country can sign it just to kind of speak towards it and speak to it, and that we will not stand for it, and just calling it out for what it is, right? It truly is right now an attack on the work that we do. So I just wanted to put it out there. Of course, no pressure. Like it's for every organization to decide if they want to put their name and their information on it. But it's something that's been circulating around. We received it at Progress Now about a week ago. And so I just wanted to put it out there. And if you guys know of organizations who would be interested in signing it, I mean, the more nonprofits that can sign it, the better. So I just wanted to offer that. I dropped it in the chat.
Thank you, Delilah. Wonderful. I've seen this letter circulating and we've certainly talked about it as a team. So thank you for bringing it to other
Awesome.
people's
Thank you.
attention. All right, folks, I'm going to stick around until half the hour in case you want to ask any questions one-on-one. But please fill out the survey before you go, and I'll look forward to seeing you again maybe next month.